AI is not going to take your jobs, but people who do AI will. And I feel that to be 100% true. We also were initially last year when our research, we're like, okay, oh yeah, AI, big deal. And let's big thinking around it. And then we realized that, oh my gosh, AI actually is not the new thing. AI in everything is the new thing. So that's the part where every product out there is going to have some level of AI around it. But there's a huge difference. And I think Yamini, the current CEO of HubSpot, and I chatted before her keynote around these areas, especially AI. And she was asking the same question based on our research. What are we finding? And I was sharing with her at that time that the difference that I'm recognizing is there are lots of people who started working on AI and saying, all right, it can create a lot of content, it can create a lot of stuff, and it just ended up being more garbage. And so you need the human in the loop to make sense of things and test different things and move things faster. So the classic and the best case scenario is when you kind of figure out, oh, this works when a person has tested, and now you're unleashing AI to just make it faster, better, not having errors and moving through that.
You're listening to RevOps Champions, a podcast created for B2B leaders to help you align your people, streamline your processes, trust your data, and leverage technology in order to grow your business. We're your hosts, Brendon Dennewill, CEO and co-founder of Dynamico,
and Amy Weaver, Dynamico's marketing director.
It's so great to have you on the show. You and I met originally in the speakers lounge at Inbound. I think it was like 2018, maybe. Does that make sense? Would that be
long time ago?
Yeah, it was a long time ago. And I'm really excited because you have such a unique way of thinking and a perspective that I think is going to be super valuable to a lot of our audience. As you could probably tell from the name of our show, RevOps Champions, RevOps is about 1/8 of what you think about at GTM Partners.
Yeah.
And what I'd really like to focus on with our time together today is going to be different to what we typically talk about on the show, because we're typically speaking specifically about how RevOps fits into organizations, or many of our guests don't even know what RevOps is. So what we talk about is how they align their marketing, sales, and customer service teams, how they align their data and technology. And in many cases, they're essentially doing about 70 or 80% of what we call RevOps. They just don't call it that, right?
Yeah.
I think with you, what I'd really love to do is zoom up the other way, because RevOps is, like I said, is a part of what your framework talks about as in go-to-market ops, essentially. Could you just give us a quick overview of, again, you've done a lot of research, you're a very data-driven business, you're a data-driven person. How did you end up with your go-to-market operating system? And just share with us, with the audience quickly, what are the components and how did you get there?
Yeah, happy to let it flow, and let's take it in the direction where you feel led.
Perfect. Tell us about the go-to-market operating system.
All right. In 2021, Brendon, Brian and I wrote a book called Move, which really stands for Market Operations Velocity and Expansion. And that really opened up the floodgates. I get to say that, we talked about go-to-market before go-to-market was cool in 2021. And it became a Wall Street Journal USA Today bestseller. And that book really opened a lot of doors for a lot of folks who came in. Hey, what are you talking about? What is go-to-market? And my background has been, as you know, running marketing at Pardot, being at Salesforce and seeing that big machine work, and then launching a company called Terminus. And when that got acquired by a PE firm, I've been in the space of just B2B for the last 2 decades, building go-to-market products, not calling it go-to-market, calling it a marketing product or a sales product or an account-based marketing or account-based sales products, and recognizing that right around the corner, really what we're ultimately talking about is go-to-market. And I will also, in the process of writing this book, I had this very deep conversation because we were interviewing a lot of people. I interviewed Brian Halligan, who was at that time, the CEO of HubSpot. And we were interviewing for the book and asked, wait, how do you define go-to-market? And specifically, who owns go-to-market? So he said 2 things that led us to the go-to-market operating system. Number one, he said, first and foremost, he owns go-to-market. He's like, the CEO owns go-to-market. And I have to dig in, and we can go deeper on that in a minute. Like, what is that? Why is that the case? And why every CEO needs to really get behind this idea of ownership and what that means. So we can dig in a little bit about it. But then also the definition, he said, look, it's a process. And specifically, it's a transformational process. It's like building a product. You have all these bug fixes that you have to go through. So you're always iterating through it. You're making decisions every single day, like 10, 15, 30, 40, 50 decisions on go to market. So he really expanded our view of what it meant. And that led us to not only write the book, but go deeper in it and put together a model, which we call, and as you have seen, called go-to-market operating system.
Yes. Can you kind of walk us through the 8 components of the go-to-market operating system?
Absolutely. It's an expanded version of the MOVE framework, if you will. The market operations velocity expansion, if you expand it, really what took us into this 8-pillar go-to-market operating system. So the first pillar is called TRM, total relevant market. And that's almost a push towards not thinking about TAM, because that's what we all know. And it's great when you're raising funds or trying to figure out how big the market is. Could you survive in that market? And you want to make sure that you're building products and selling in a growing market. So TAM makes sense in that. But when it comes to actually hitting your numbers, especially from a RevOps audience, like when you're thinking about hitting your numbers, most likely you want to focus on a few segments that you know you're going to hit that number. And that's what we call TRM, total relevant market. We believe companies would do way better if they can understand and reduce the scope of how many different directions they go about to get their ICP and focus on TRM. So that's the first pillar. The second pillar is called market investment map. This is my personal favorite for many number of reasons. But specifically, Brendon, this is my favorite because I don't think most companies do that at all. The market investment map is really literally think about lining up all of your products on one side. Let's say these are all the rows, and on the columns are all the different segments you're going to go after. And you're trying to find that perfect match where you create that the product works and you know it's great and you're passionate about it. And there is a segment that is also very passionate about it. So it's a 5 on 5 in that sense. When you do that, that's how prioritization really takes place and should take place in organizations. Otherwise, it's just whoever's opinion is the loudest. That's where most organizations move, and therefore you lack resources and efforts around it. So market investment map. The third is we combined brand and demand into one pillar. And the reason we did that is because our whole research showed that, and we write this research if people want to go look at it, and I know you do, which is GTM Monday. Over 130,000 people read it every Monday now. So it's starting to just grow over the last year and a half since we launched it. And the point of it is because we believe brand drives demand. It's not most people have tried to keep brand separate and demand separate. All of our research showed that no, brand and demand actually goes hand in hand. And that includes the different go-to-market motions you can think about. The fourth pillar is called pipeline velocity. That one specifically, as the name suggests, it's all about how can you scale the process internally to get faster. Right now, all of our research shows that the pipeline is stalled, the timeline is too long. And one of the big reasons we find that to be an issue is because if you don't have a proper process of accelerating pipeline, your business is actually going to go in a really negative direction quickly because your cost of acquisition is just going to be off the roof. So pipeline velocity really deals with that. The new compensation model, all of those things are in the pipeline velocity bucket. Then you go further, we call it the customer time to value. Then I'll go in one more, which is customer expansion. Those are the next two pillars. Customer time to value and customer expansion really focus on what we call is NRR, net revenue retention, because we all know if you're a RevOps person, you probably are very close to this. If a company has over 100% or 120% NRR, you know it's a healthy business. You know that your customers are staying with you. You know that you can actually take now bets in the marketplace because you don't have to always worry about acquisition. So that's what customer time to value and customer expansion is. Then RevOps, which is literally your area of expertise, is one of the pillars. We actually debated, Brendon, quite a bit to put RevOps in the center of the operating system to a pillar because we believe that it's like the nervous system of how go-to-market should run. But we also recognize that the RevOps is good and important and is a cornerstone for a lot of the work we do strategically. It's also important to recognize that all these pillars don't feel like they are not as important. So we have to turn that into a pillar. And again, that's just through a lot of interviews and research. And the last one is leadership and management. This is all about the rhythms. How do you create a go-to-market dashboard? How do you actually have go-to-market meetings? And how do you create what we call clarity over certainty? so that you can drive your business forward. So those are the 8 pillars: TRM, total relevant market, market investment map, brand and demand, pipeline velocity, customer time to value, customer expansion, RevOps, and leadership and management.
And your suggestion is that businesses or business leaders, are they solving for them in that order or not necessarily? I mean, obviously, ultimately, they need to solve all 8, but do they start with TRM or do they start somewhere else potentially?
That's a great question. A lot of our advisory work when we do with clients, we don't necessarily go in, but you have to use a specific way to do it. We would walk into organization, Brendon, sometimes, and they're like, oh, we know our ICP. We're like one of the clients we have. They're specifically in financial services. They get that market really well. The founder has been there for 20 years. They just know that market. So we don't need to do TRM at all in that. We just skip that. And their challenge really is they got 8 different products. And they got 2, and they're a $25 million company. So now if you have 8 products at $25 million in revenue, the first thing we got to help them do is that, what are your top 2? And when we dug in and did the market investment map with them, it was very clear that 80, 90%, and they knew it, but it requires some level of facilitation for that truth to be unveiled, as if you wanted people to come to that conclusion themselves. So it was very clear that there were 2 products that were very much the front runners. And if they focused on that with that TRM that they already know really well, they would have been a 50 million company by now. And that clarity, and that's why we talk about this idea of clarity over certainty. Nothing is certain outside of death and taxes. I don't know anything else that's as certain. But what is certain, what can we do is create clarity within the team. So it's not required to go in that order, although we would say that you have to have an understanding of thinking about these 8 areas around go-to-market.
Yeah. And I guess that example you just gave of, a company with 8 products, and you again know from your research that they'd be a lot more successful and their pipeline velocity would be a lot better if they could focus on the 2 that were really driving the most revenue, right?
Yeah.
So the example that's often used in that is, of course, is Steve Jobs and Apple, right? Where he said, look, we have to just reduce the number of products that we had or that we have. And of course, it worked.
A massive exit, right? And we share that example as well. What's interesting is it's extremely hard process, though. Unless you have an external, in that case, Steve Jobs actually came back into his company. So he was almost external to the company coming in. And that's really why a lot of the advisory work we do, we sometimes feel like we're getting paid to tell them what they actually already know in many ways. But the whole team hasn't been able to get around each other. They're just busy at incremental steps and doesn't really move the needle forward. And now when you're allowed to take a step back, which is what frameworks are supposed to do, all frameworks and even the go-to-market operating system, if you've seen the book Move, we had 2 quotes on the book. One is from Jeffrey Moore, who's saying, hey, this is the best book ever. Go buy it. This is amazing. And at the bottom of the front cover, have another quote from my friend Christopher Lockett. He said, this book sucks. And the reason is because go-to-market is not one way you can do it. It's a framework. So these frameworks are supposed to help you facilitate a very educated conversation without saying, oh, we got a marketing problem, we got a sales problem, we got a CS problem. No, what you have is a go-to-market problem. And when you dive into that, you're actually taking people out of it, departments out of it, and all of you, especially at the executive level, should function as go-to-market business leaders trying to solve go-to-market problems to move your company forward. And that doesn't happen unless you're using some sort of unbiased framework that is supposed to help you answer some of the deep questions in your business.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And in fact, we've had this debate a few times, both on the show and then also internally here at Dynamico, about should RevOps be in the center or is it go-to-market? And I think one of the things that I've learned through a lot of the content that you've created at GTM Partners is my mistaken mindset was that go-to-market is how you start. In other words, how you acquire net new customers. But when you think about it and the way that you talk about it, especially when you're doing it as a revenue team with marketing, sales, and customer service, you realize that in fact, GTM, so your go-to-market is evolving continuously as well. Because if your go-to-market isn't evolving, in other words, so your framework is the circle with GTM is essentially the hub, and everything is turning around the hub, right?
Yeah.
Because where I made a mistake, and I'm sure a lot of people who see this model for the first time make the same mistake, is like, oh, but I thought go-to-market was just how we acquire those net new customers. But in fact, that's continuously evolving. And if you just look at it from a CS perspective, for example, customer service can completely change how you go to market over time. And it affects your pipeline from growing existing customers, not just focusing on net new customers, et cetera. So it's really cool how you guys ended up with go-to-market at the middle.
Yeah, it really was a conversation. I'll go back to the Brian Halligan conversation where he said he owns it. That really opened my eyes to it. I'm like, what do you mean you own it? You're a CEO of $1 billion publicly traded company. I understand the buck stops with you, and maybe that's how you're talking about it. But really, it is like, no, I don't think you understand, Sangram. He said, I really own it. And we dug into it. And he's like, look, who's going to make the decision between should I spend more money in marketing or sales? That's a go-to-market decision. Who's going to make the decision between if you should go in EMEA or APAC or stay in North America? That's a go-to-market decision. Who's going to make the decision if we should acquire a company or partner or launch an agency program? That's a go-to-market decision. So he went through these iterations of it where I was like, oh my goodness, I always thought go-to-market was about launching a product and getting the market. To your point, Brendon, I've lived that and had that mindset. But that's when it was very clear that, oh, it truly, in a truest sense, in the purest sense of the word, go-to-market actually is, no matter how you want to look at it, slice it, is owned by the CEO. A lot of CEOs may not say it or may not think about it, but that's their role. That's their job. Now, that doesn't mean you're executing it and looking at number of leads. And no, you actually are making go-to-market decisions. That's what you really are doing as the CEO. You're not making decisions to figure out payroll and all the, I mean, those are administrative roles. What you're really doing is actually making go-to-market decisions. And that is a very, very key distinction that we found in our research.
Yeah. So essentially, so for CEOs and leaders listening or watching this episode, if they put themselves in the center of your go-to-market operating system model, that's essentially where they say, look, go-to-market is my responsibility.
Yep.
And whether it's a leadership and management decision, or it's a TRM decision, or it's a customer expansion decision, it all comes back to go-to-market. And again, which in hindsight, of course, now that you've done all the hard work and you've had all those long conversations and debates to get there, it makes total sense because the CEO is also the visionary of the company.
Yeah.
They need to be looking around the corner to see what's next. Well, how do you figure out how to then operationalize what's next? That's your go-to-market, right? So it's continuously evolving.
It certainly is. One of the other frameworks, Brendon, that you probably have seen and is something that we get asked about all the time in the book and in the operating system is this 3 Ps framework. And that's another one that is really very keen towards RevOps as a role, which is problem market fit, product market fit, and platform market fit. Ultimately, everybody's in the pursuit of figuring out how you navigate through those. And that's why we have a squiggly line, not a straight line, because it is up and down and you navigate through what we call the valleys of death between each one of these stages. What's very interesting we found in our research was when you are in a problem market fit, which means you're still trying to ideate and figure out, you actually don't need a quote unquote RevOps role. What you need is everyone in the function needs to have an individual role so they can go and do what they need to do so that they can move fast. Because in the early days, you're just trying to move things forward. In a product market, you need more of an aligned process. That's where you need marketing and sales to start working together. That's typically when companies hire actually marketing role and sales role. That's where really RevOps slowly starts to become a thing in your organization, where you need a single source of truth of where your acquisition is coming from and how to go in a specific segment. And that's great. And especially if you have a singular product, it's the beginning of RevOps, I think. But it's absolutely mandatory in all of our research is if you have a multiple product strategy and you're trying to go from a product to a platform, you can't get there without a classic RevOps role, which is really where they're actually able to say, you know what? Not only we know which segments to go from an acquisition perspective, but what about these cohort? The cohort, if let's say you have 10 types of customers, the first type of customer, cohort 1 and cohort 2, is where we are getting the most value. Let's invest more in these cohorts and these customers as opposed to other customers. And these kind of decisions are almost impossible to make unless you have somebody looking at that's independent of these functional roles of marketing and sales. And that's why I love the role of RevOps.
Yes. Again, for the listener's sake, I love the point that you make about, around until you get to a certain point, which is why, for example, your own marketing and your positioning is for companies that are 10 million or more in revenue, which is where you start to potentially feel the need for RevOps, because that's where scale really becomes a lot more challenging. And up until that point, you can get away with just marketing is doing marketing, sales is doing sales, customer service is doing customer service, and you just figure it out because you can. But finally, you get to that ceiling where it's like, okay, we cannot break through the ceiling until we figure out how to operationalize, in this case, the revenue team. But I'm seeing more and more how the go-to-market operating system starts to make more and more sense as a way to, and ultimately these terms, which even today to folks listening to this episode still have never heard of either RevOps or go-to-market ops or even GTM in that form. And it really doesn't matter. We have to call it something. What's most important is that you're listening to how these things are all connected and why you need to pay attention to these things. If you feel like you have a go-to-market problem or a RevOps problem, don't get hung up on the terms. Just dig more into how will these impact and improve your alignment, which, so much of what we talk about is around alignment. And it's aligning of your people, your processes, your data, and then finally your systems, which of course is what RevOps does. How do you do whatever you're doing faster and better?
I'll just share a couple of thoughts on what you just said. One, our latest research, we did a whole research around what is stopping people from hitting their numbers, which I'm assuming your audience probably is very interested in that. And almost every company, every CEO, every go-to-market leader is trying to understand why. Why are we not hitting the numbers we are? And we asked very basic questions in that. And the top three options really were, are you not hitting your numbers because of market conditions? Which we thought will surely be the reason why people would say. The second option was, is it because it's very competitive and price competitive right now in the marketplace? Maybe that's the reason you're not hitting your numbers. And we thought that may be a great second. And the third that we really didn't necessarily think would be a winner, but it ended up being the winner, and I'll tell you a percentage in a second, was, are you not hitting your numbers because you don't have clarity and alignment in your organization? And it was staggering. It was 68% of the go-to-market leaders said the reason they don't hit their numbers today or not hitting their numbers from the last few quarters is because at the executive level, they do not have clarity and alignment. That should send chills to everyone, is the fact that everyone is working so hard. Everybody's working double time right now. Teams are smaller, budgets are shorter, the sales cycles are longer. All of these are true. And in spite, the reason you actually are not there is not because you're not smart, not because you don't have enough money, not because you don't have teams, is because you don't really know your North Star. You haven't really gone through what we call the 8-question analysis for your business to be aligned, to be clear about those things. And it was shocking to me. I thought, since you brought up alignment, I thought I'll share that stat with you.
Yeah, you mentioned that in your talk at Inbound as well. Everybody sitting in the audience who had been asked that question by you for the first time were like, everyone was kind of looking around going, yeah, it's definitely lack of clarity,
Yeah.
Which is a very scary thought. But again, it kind of makes me realize how you've ended up with the model that you have, because, a lot of people listening to this show are trying to figure out how they're going to use technology to help their businesses grow better. Because again, 80+% of the people listening are HubSpot customers. And that's what HubSpot's all about as well, is how do you grow better, which is, of course, very aligned with your slogan and your positioning too, because, why wouldn't we want to help businesses grow better?
Yeah.
But I think, again, this reemphasizes the fact that as technology evolves, and we all see it happening both personally at home as well as in our work, technology is impacting how we're doing our jobs every single day, which over time will absolutely impact how we connect with our customers. What do you call that? That is a change in go-to-market, right?
Yep.
So if your customers are buying and thinking differently, you have to adapt, which means that you have to adapt your go-to-market. It really is very cool what the work that you guys are doing. So just sort of bringing it back again to our audience. So obviously the stuff that you talk about is very appealing and resonates a lot with the SaaS industry. We work with a lot of SaaS companies, but it's really, for us, it's not a focus because I won't go into all the reasons, but they seem to have enough resources to figure a lot of this stuff out themselves. Our focus is typically more in sort of manufacturing companies, professional services like architecture, engineering, construction companies. We also work with franchises and then some large nonprofits. And again, for them, a lot of this language and the metrics that we talk about, whether it's NRR or LTV or CAC, are not the typical metrics that they track in the first place. But you mentioned earlier this financial services client that you have. How do you find, again, you're doing events on an ongoing basis, you're continuously doing research, you're getting direct feedback in a lot of the talks that you and your team do. How does it differ between SaaS, where they seem to get this a lot more easily, versus industries who don't typically use the language that we're using here?
A lot of our customers are actually also non-tech. So we have supply chain customers, manufacturing customers, financial services. And because we live in the strategy world with them, we're not in the execution. We're not pushing buttons. We're not actually guiding them in the details of it. We're actually pointing them in the right direction and moving it. So for example, one of our clients, they have what they can leverage from the SaaS is they didn't have a good pricing structure. They're using a different pricing structure. And we have like 9 different models. And that's one of what we used in the brand and demand is like, well, how are you going to price it? So our goal is always to guide them to it. So one of the things that we have done as part of our go-to-market OS, and people can check it out on the website and GTM Monday, is we created these 8 questions very specifically, and they are ubiquitous. Anybody, regardless of what the size, the stage, or the industry they are in, these are the 8 questions we believe, based on everything that we've been doing, are the same 8 questions that everyone is trying to ask. They may use different words around them. They may have a internal lingo or a jargon in their industry, but ultimately it's the same 8 questions. And you use one of those questions, which is the very first question we use as part of TRM. To answer the TRM question, the number one question is, where can you grow the most? That is the basic question that every organization, doesn't matter what they are. In the market investment map, the question is, which products create the highest customer value? So now you're getting into which products and how do I need to segment that? You think about brand and demand. How will you engage your customers with a differentiated point of view? So now you're saying, well, do I have a point of view in the marketplace that will get me in front of my customers that is differentiated from my competitors? So when you go through these 8 questions, and again, as you know, everybody can download it for free from our website. The point is, these 8 questions are very, very, we have not found another way of looking at it. And the same thing is with our 15 go-to-market problems that you have seen. Our research, I would love to find somebody to find me a 16th go-to-market problem, but all of our research, having done it with thousands of companies, is that there are only 15 go-to-market problems. There is not a 16th one, no matter how complex the business happens to be. We have customers like Honeywell, so like very large, we're working with a business unit to a $5 million business. And the reason we're able to do that and scale it is the impact that we can have of 5, 10, 20 million is amazing, because once they figure out the answers to this question, they can double, triple in their business. Whereas when you think about a Honeywell and within a small business unit within that, it's very incremental for them because they have to go through a lot of different things. These 8 questions really is a cornerstone. So we don't find any issue. And I'm assuming from a RevOps perspective, you're looking at and trying to create that single source of truth. You're probably finding something similar.
Yes. I guess the good news for the folks listening, though, is there are only 15 potential problems or reasons.
Yeah.
So we don't have to go and look for a 16th. But to your point, of course, if there is a 16th one, then we want to hear about it.
Yeah, bring it.
But the good news is there are only 15 from all the research that's taken place to this point. And that which should make it easier for us as business leaders to figure out which one of those is most relevant or which ones do we need to solve. And then, of course, get back to the 8 areas, the 8 questions of like, okay, so where do we start?
Yeah. And to your point, you mentioned something earlier, Brendon, is some people might know where they want to grow. Some people may have a great point of view. Some people might know which go-to-market motion, but their products may not be sticky. So we have this ROI framework where we show, is your product creating or service, whatever that might be. And that's another thing. It aligns to both product. We have product companies and services companies that are our customers and using our frameworks. And we initially used to think, this is really interesting. This fascinated me, actually. I initially used to always think that the ROI for any product or service is in numbers. Like if you put $1 in, you give $3 out. Like that's the only way to look at ROI. And I've been amazed with all the research that we got to do is that no, there are actually 5 different ways of looking at ROI. One of them is, and HubSpot is a great example of it, and Salesforce is transformational ROI, which means you don't look at what the ROI is. People are just going to use a CRM and they may choose to use HubSpot, but nobody's going and asking, what is the ROI of HubSpot? Nobody's asking that question anymore. Nobody's asking the question of ROI of email. Like, so there's a transformational element of it. Slack, like nobody's asking the ROI. They just understand what that is. And so we created these 5 different types of ROI to help people realize that, yeah, you can have transformational, you can have productivity oriented, it could be necessity, but what you don't want, and this was the piece that was fascinating, what you don't want is muddy middle, meaning they have an indirect ROI. And I think RevOps people are typically very good at identifying, like that's what you're hearing from your customer. The CS person is the one where you have a huge number. They have to go through a lot of hoops to get the customer to not only stay, but if they want to renew or if they want to expand, it's really hard. And that's when you know that, well, we're in the muddy middle. They like the product, they like what it does, but it doesn't really give you the perfect ROI. And a lot of times it's just the fact that you're trying to say a different story than what the real story is. Maybe it's a transformational ROI where it changed the way they do things, and you have to be reminding them of those milestones and those changes and the change behavior and the change outcome, as opposed to, oh, you have put $1 in and you haven't got another $3, so it doesn't work.
Yes. In fact, are you familiar with ProSci?
No, what's that?
They're probably the most well-known organization that is essentially educating and creating content around change management. So we had a really interesting conversation with a senior person there yesterday, and we're going to continue to have that conversation and also, make sure we get them on the podcast, because, as you were running through all those different things, and the reason that we had this conversation with ProSci is because one of the biggest resistors, you've seen the inside of Salesforce, HubSpot incredibly well. As we are solving for larger businesses with HubSpot, at one point up until about 6 years ago, HubSpot was only really a good solution for businesses up to maybe 100 or 200 employees. The reality is that now there are businesses or business units with 2,000 employees that HubSpot is a fantastic fit for, which means that they're getting into the territory of Salesforce and Dynamics, for example. And we thought, okay, well, if we hire really smart people from Salesforce or Dynamics ecosystem, that they've essentially seen where the HubSpot ecosystem is going. But in fact, we've tried it for a year and realized actually the ecosystems are so different because of their go-to-market. As we saw at Inbound last month with HubSpot's new slogan, which is easy, fast, and unified, the easy, fast, and unified is in direct competition to Salesforce and Dynamics, who are slow, not so easy, and not unified. You have to cobble them together. And we realize that people who are used to living in that complexity, they're not necessarily the right people to solve for when you in a really easy framework or an easy system.
Yeah, I mean, that's like the crossing the chasm, Jeffrey Moore, like the early adopters, the innovators, you want them to be on it. And then these other people, the laggards, will come back later. It's so true. And I think HubSpot is certainly doing that with their easy, fast, and unified model, single sign-on, and all of those things. I think it does help the buyer make it easy because the customers of HubSpot, for the most part, are looking for that. They don't have, and always are not in big enterprise companies. They are like agencies and small businesses and mid-size. They're just looking for that exact thing every day. So that's why I love the power of words. When you were asking about how do you guys come up with the operating system, the part I left out was the reason we use the word operating system was because we recognize that we're not giving a definitive answer to the world. Like, here it is. It is a reminder to us that it will continue to be evolving in its nature. It will have elements in it that might change over a period of time. We might look at different ways of driving pipeline than whatever we are sharing right now. For example, the go-to-market motions, when we started, we had 4: inbound, outbound, and PLG, but then we added event-led, community-led around it. And therefore now there are like 5 or 6 go-to-market motions. So we want to make sure that the concepts at the highest levels might still remain the same in terms of the pillars, but how you go about it and what changes in the marketplace, it needs to be adaptable. And therefore, we may have versions of whatever we are creating in the operating system over a period of time. And so it's a constant reminder to us to know, and for the people that use it, that this is a framework. It's not supposed to be perfect. It's supposed to give you the way, 80% of it, so that you can have intelligent conversation to come to a decision that worked in a nuanced way for your business, not the way that you apply this and then voila, all problems are gone. That's not the case.
Yeah. So we run on the Entrepreneurial Operating System, EOS. Yeah.
EOS. Yeah. A lot of people compare it to it. Like the best compliment I guess we have gotten around this, and I think at some point I need to talk to the EOS guys about this. They said, man, EOS is helping us just put a structure around our company together, our vision, the big rocks, and all the elements that come with it, like the 6 different things. And what your go-to-market operating system is doing is to helping us make money, because it's literally showing you how you should create demand, how you should segment, how you should go behind for your customer, what dashboard to use. So that's the biggest compliment we have got is EOS is helping us structure the company in the right way. So we are focused on the right things. And you're literally showing us how to make money. And I'm like, all right, that sounds good.
Yeah, that's okay. That's great. So that answers my question, because again, we and a lot of our clients run on EOS. In this part of the world, in Minnesota, it's a very heavily used business operating system, which of course is different to a go-to-market operating system.
Yeah.
So it'll be interesting to see at some point, like visually, how these things all fit together. You have the business operating system, you have the go-to-market operating system, then you have the RevOps operating system.
Yeah.
Sangram, before I let you go, the thesis of the RevOps Champions podcast is, why do some companies scale better than others?
Mm-hmm.
For example, you take 5 companies in the same industry, all of them have 200 employees. They have access to the same funding. They have access to the same technology and tools. Why does one of them outperform and the others and scale better than the others?
I think the best example for this one is what we call, and you've heard me say this before probably, is the navigating the 5 valleys of death. And that's really what they are. They're valleys of death. And that literally is what you're describing. It's a little bit more forced version of that same statement, is like, well, why do some companies fail pretty much and die? And it's because they are not looking at and navigating and don't know which valley of death they are in. So for example, first valley is create but can't market. What that means is that you have a great product, but you haven't figured out market. And if you don't do that, you can add sales, you can add customer success, you can add all these other things. You're never going to be able to get to the milestone for your business. The second valley of death is market but can't sell. You may have a great brand out there, great demand, but you haven't figured out the sales motion. Maybe it's your pricing, maybe it's your packaging, whatever that might be. Or you go, so create can market but can't sell. You can sell, like maybe the rep is selling it, but can't deliver it. So your product team is like, well, wait a minute, what did we sell? We don't even have these things. We don't even sell to enterprise. Why are we selling this? Happens all the time. So you can't deliver it. Or maybe you can deliver it, but you can't renew, which means that the classic question of broken heart, which is, oh, I love you, but I can justify it to my executive team. And so you can't be renewed. And that's really is a retention issue. And then finally, even if you're able to renew, but if you can expand it, if you can get more than one persona to buy, if you can have one more product line to expand your business within the existing base, then you can expand. And therefore, your NRR is not going to be over 100% no matter what you do. And therefore, if you are in these valleys of death, and every company is in some valley of death, most time maybe 1 or 2 valleys of death, how you navigate out of those valleys is really the difference between a company that makes it and the company that pretty much fakes it.
That's a really great answer, and very different to any other answer we've had. So if you were to dig one layer deeper, what do, let's say, the leadership teams of those the companies who can progress from one valley of death to the next, what do they have that maybe their competitors don't?
I believe most of them, like I remember my last company, Terminus, like we grew to 350 people, got acquired by PE firm. So having that experience poured out to Salesforce experience, I feel like, and we had a business coach, and it sounds very like crazy. And at that time, I didn't realize the importance of it. You gotta have a business coach or advisors or frameworks, and we used all kinds of frameworks. And he would literally come in every month, and we would do this thing where we are going through these problems, but he would just pull us out of it and help us, like, all right, so what problem are we solving again? And he didn't know anything about our business, nothing. He would just pull us out and then take us again back into the forward. So I think the biggest difference is, I believe most entrepreneurs are working hard. They're hustling their way through it. And I wouldn't put it on a person individually. I think the lack of frameworks, the lack of unified view of how and what problems we're solving, going back to clarity around that, alignment around that, because you could have the right answer and still fail. 100%.
Sure.
You can have the right answer and still fail. Yeah. And you could have a half-baked answer, but clear and aligned with your team, you'll go further faster. Hands down. Like that was our research shows. That's what I've seen personally. So I think it's really not up to an individual's fault. It's really, as a team, are you aligned? Can you go at it at the same pace that everybody's thinking about? And can you drive that together with a classic set of frameworks that will help you guide that North Star forward? And that part is really the reason I feel most companies are able to do it versus not.
That's really interesting, because it reminds me of, again, it sort of brings me back to the EOS framework. You know, if you're working with an implementer who you meet with every 90 days to do your quarterly planning, and then for 2 days to do your annual planning, that's essentially the role that they play.
Right on.
And then many of us, you know, who are in other kinds of coaching organizations, whether it's Vistage or Strategic Coach or both, that's where again, you have people just asking you questions that they don't know your business, but they're saying, well, have you thought about this? Or have you thought about that?
Yeah, you need an outside-in perspective. I think we are too close in the forest, to the trees. Like, you can't see it. We need to humble ourselves. We need a wise counsel around us. And I think now more than ever, because the market is shifting so fast. And there was a time when you could raise 50 million, and if you made 10 million, you would look like a hero. Today, you can't raise money and you still have to build a $10 million company. Well, how do you do that? So the games have changed. The stakes have completely up leveled. And so you need wise counsel and frameworks around you to beat the odds.
Great. So it's essentially that combination of advisors or whatever, and then frameworks, right?
Yeah.
Is what you would credit it based on your experience. Can I let you go after answering one more question, which is, how is AI going to impact all this?
I think AI, there are companies today. One of our big mega trends is obviously AI, but I think somebody said this, which is AI is not going to take your jobs, but people who do AI will. And I feel that to be 100% true. We also were initially last year, when our research, we're like, okay, oh yeah, AI, big deal. And let's big thinking around it. And then we realized that, oh my gosh, AI actually is not the new thing. AI in everything is the new thing. So that's the part where every product out there is going to have some level of AI around it. But there's a huge difference. And I think Yamini, the current CEO of HubSpot, and I chatted before her keynote around these areas, especially AI. And she was asking the same question based on our research. What are we finding? And I was sharing with her at that time that the difference that I'm recognizing is there are lots of people who started working on AI and saying, all right, it can create a lot of content, it can create a lot of stuff, and it just ended up being more garbage. And so you need the human in the loop to make sense of things and test different things and move things faster. So the classic and the best case scenario is when you kind of figure out, oh, this works when a person has tested, and now you're unleashing AI to just make it faster, better, not having errors, and moving to. I think that's the part. People are reversing it. People are saying, oh, AI can do everything. So let me see what that's not the way to go about it. The way to go about it is, I know how to get this thing done. Now let me find out if I can get it done faster, better, cheaper. Now that's a completely different ball game. And that is going to happen. Absolutely.
And in fact, just in the last month, as we've been digging into this, the biggest obstacle that we found for companies, because everyone now, and I guess we're talking primarily about HubSpot customers who now have access to all these amazing AI tools that are already built into HubSpot and will continue to grow and improve. But their first obstacle, as we were trying to figure out how do we help companies make use of these tools, is how is your data organized and is your data clean? Because if it's not, they don't even think about AI, because to your point, AI can make you go faster, but only if it's working with accurate data.
Yeah, 100%.
So I think there's going to be a lot of cleaning up of data going on here in Q4 and into Q1 and probably all of 2025, because I think organizations, if they haven't figured it out already, they're going to figure out pretty quick that until your data is really in good shape, you're not going to be able to use AI, or at least benefit to the maximum possibility.
Right on.
Sangram, thanks so much again for being here today. I know you've had another big week, so I thank you for making time for us.
I know, right. This was fun conversation. It helps me think through a lot of different things that are going through and synthesizes it. So I appreciate you and the community and just for having me.
Absolutely. And now please go and enjoy your weekend with your family.
All right. Same for you. Take care, Brendon.
Thanks, Sangram. Take care.
Did you enjoy this episode?
Find more at RevOpsChampions.com.